All right, welcome everyone. On behalf of Benefit Express, we're happy you could join us this afternoon for our pros and cons of self-insured versus fully insured webinar. Larry Grugine, our ERISA attorney, is happily presenting today, and he is a great resource for questions, so ask away. He will pause several times, and I will unmute for questions, or if you don't feel comfortable verbally asking, or if it's easier, you can just use the questions tab in your GoToWebinar toolbar, and I will ask the question on your behalf.
Oh, Stacey, did you put the slides on the...
You know what, we didn't today. So what we can do is they'll be in an email sent to everyone after the webinar, for those of you that need them, for sure. Larry, we'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to change a few things going forward with that.
Oh, okay.
But our next webinar is June 28th at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, and that will be on developments in 2016 developments in health and welfare plans, and that's going to be a big one, so you don't want to miss that. And
and let me tell you, I've just finished the slides. I'm finishing them up. At first I thought I wouldn't have enough, and I think there's so much, over the last month there's been so much stuff happening. I'm going to have between 70 to 80 slides, and there's so much that's happened over the last month or two. It is amazing. So please don't miss it. I'm going to go into detail on a number of things. So I think it's going to be an important seminar.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Larry, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. The purpose behind this seminar is giving you an introduction to the whole area of being self-insured. Ever since healthcare reform came in 2010, and the employer mandate has kicked in, and the various taxes have kicked in, many employers who would never think of being self-insured have actually converted and are moving into self-insured. So I think because of the costs involved and then the risk involved, I think really what you have to understand what you're getting into when you decide to go self-insured. The first thing I think what you need to do is what are the trends that are happening out there for employers. Generally, in the past, you had to be fairly large to be self-insured. Well, that has gone by the wayside over the last 3 or 4 years, and even small employers, I've seen situations where employers less than 10 have gone self-insured. But it's not for the faint of heart, and what this seminar will do was point out to you, and this is the agenda right here, what is it, what is self-insured, what's happening in the marketplace, what are the trends over the last few years in self-insured, looking at the fully insured versus self-insured model, how to design it, the mechanics of self-insuring scenarios, pros and cons, and then the last thing, which is probably most important, is how the Affordable Care Act has impacted self-funding. So, I mean, this is really, we call this self-funding or self-insured. And what this seminar will do, we'll talk about the issues. So what is self-funding? As this slide indicates, when an employer group wants to offer health benefits to their employees, not paid by the insurance company, they want to take the responsibility of offering coverage in self-insuring that obligation. So there's 2 levels of self-insured. First of all, a fully self-insured. These are the large companies. Basically, they take all the risk, and basically what they do, they create funds and assets to fund their liability. And these are generally jumbo cases like Microsoft, Walmart, General Motors. They don't purchase stop loss. They actually create a Viva and have assets to pay for the risk. Well, because of the fact that smaller employers are looking at this, in regard to self-funding, employers purchase insurance policy to take part of the risk. Now, it's still considered to be self-insured, and once you go self-insured, this seminar doesn't talk about that, but one other area that I think you should look at, and many employers forget, is the fact that now you're subject to non-discrimination rules. The non-discrimination rules that apply under 45H apply. And currently there's no discrimination rules for insured. So this is kind of the big shock that you go into. And I'm not gonna talk about the discrimination rules. You should just know they're out there. But basically, employers have been kind of self-insuring for a while as the deductibles get higher and higher and higher. And what employers are doing, what many employers are doing, they're introducing self-insurance or self-funding by using HRAs. So in the past, the deductibles were $250, $500. Now it's unusual to see deductibles $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. Well, that's a form of self-insurance because HRAs are self-funded. So over time, this is becoming a more normal situation. And what employers are doing, they're even going one step beyond that, where they're using a stop-loss coverage of $75,000, $100,000, $200,000, where the employer takes that obligation, and the rest of it is through a stop-loss coverage. So again, it's one step where in the past, all benefits with a small deductible were normal. Now, as employers go to more high deductible, and the next logical step, the third step out of this, is going full self-insured. So this is the trend, and this is from the Kaiser Family Foundation. You'll see the trends and what's happening over the last almost 20 years. And as you can see there, that over time the prevalence of self-insured has increased. But when you look at this, what's very interesting, it's become more prevalent with very large companies, 5,000 or more, but for companies between 3 to 99, it's still only 15, 16, 17%. So it's still, it's more common with larger companies than with smaller companies. But again, the trend over the last 5 years is changing. Now, percentage of covered employees in partially or completely self-funded plans have stabilized over the last 10 years. But as you can see, for smaller companies, it's starting to edge up over the last 5 years. So because of most larger companies are self-insured, that's why it's 84% of workers are covered by self-insured plans. Now also too, in looking at this in this next slide, talking about the type of plans that are self-insured, and you can see that what's the most common self-insured model is PPOs as opposed to HMOs. And there we have a PPO, 70% of PPOs are self-insured as opposed to HMOs, only 31%. So depending on the type of coverage you have, most HMOs are going to be insured, where many PPOs are self-insured. Now, one major difference between insured and self-insured is the fact that now what you need, because you won't have an insurance certificate, you need a plan document and an SPD. And basically, the way that most self-funded plans are organized is that there has to be created a plan document / SPD that basically replicates an insurance certificate and indicates the fact that what benefits and what limitations are there. So as in a self-insured health plan, the employer, with the assistance of broker or attorney, creates and defines and establishes a benefit plan. So basically, everything that had to be in an insurance certificate now is created with the help of all these various players to see what benefits are going to be provided. So for groups that are currently fully insured, the new plans are normally modeled under the current fully insured plans, and self-insured plans are governed by ERISA. And again, what the benefit is in this situation, they're not subject to insurance mandates. So therefore, the insurance mandates that drive up cost, depending on what state you're in, are not going to be, again, applicable to self-funded plans. So one of the advantages is that there's groups have great flexibility in plan design. Now, that comes with a lot of liability, a lot of risk. Because basically the team that you have to know what they're doing and to make sure that the benefits is what the employer wants. Because under an insured product, the employer steps away and buys an insured product, and it's the insurance company that decides what benefits are going to be in the insured product along with the state mandates. Here with the self-insured, the employer has to be more engaged and understand what they're getting into and understand what limitations and benefits are going to be offered. Now, with many self-insured products, depending on where you go, they could be, the employer could be given a plan document SPD, but again, the employer has to understand what's in there. And the major difference is with self-insured situations, the employer has more discretion about what is contained in the plan document SPD. Or under the insured product, the employer doesn't have discretion. They have to step away, and for claims payment, the insurance company is the fiduciary. They determine who's eligible, what claims are paid under the insurance contract. Here, in designing the product, the employer has more discretion. But again, what comes with more discretion is more liability and more responsibility. So this is an important element of the self-insured situation because you have to decide what's going to be in the plan document and SPD. So here are the players in designing your self-insured product. This is the plan sponsor, and then consulting services, legal services, actuarial services, depending, because you have to come up with the cost of what these benefits are going to, how these benefits are going to be funded. Accounting and auditing services, stop-loss insurer, third parties providing administrative services, and you may have other third parties that are offering various specialized plan administration services, including RX, disease management, and then lastly, you have to basically buy a provider network because now the insurance company is not going to be involved, and therefore whoever you work with to design this program has to have contact with the various provider networks to make sure that benefits are going to be provided. So self-insured employers can either administer their claims in-house or subcontract with a third-party administrator. TPAs can also help employers set up the group health plans and coordinate stop-loss coverage. And again, depending on what you want, you either can buy a bundled administrative services agreement versus unbundled with a third-party administrator. And again, what many employers do, since they are used to working with either Blue Cross Blue Shield or some of the other carriers, they offer ASO agreements and they provide all the services. So and the leap is not that bad in going to self-funded, but again, you have to understand what you're getting into. And there are many third-party administrators in Chicago that provide services for self-funded plans. So the TPAs provide many services to the employer, including claim and premium administration, reporting, plan document creation, stop-loss integration, cost containment features, either in-house or subcontracted, PPO access, and then COBRA and HIPAA administration. So the third-party administrator is an extremely important player in designing a self-funded plan. So depending on, and again, in looking for a third-party administrator, you may get some or all these services contained in this slide from a third-party administrator, depending on what their services they offer. Also, medical claims. Self-funded plans would generally lease PPO networks in order to provide services. So again, depending on which network you get will depend on that will determine the discounts and what services are going to be provided. So items to consider in looking at a physician's network are robust and easily accessible to members, discount structure and payment timeline, TPA integration, and accurately pricing stop-loss carriers. So again, it's extremely important to decide which physician networks, and again, most of the large insurers will rent their network. So again, depending on what's in your area. Again, this is an important aspect, and again, many self-funded plans are again PPOs, and so you can rent a network. Also, pharmacy benefit programs. And again, under this situation, essentially an RX CPA married to a PPO network and provides access to major pharmacies, negotiate discounts on the employer's behalf, manage vulnerabilities on behalf of the employer, and many offer mail order and especially drug programs. So there are many different pharmacy benefit management that you can rent. And that would give, again, most TPAs have contacts with numerous of these management and are willing to integrate their RX claim information in their monthly reporting. Now, one of the major benefits that I haven't mentioned before, and one of the complaints that many employers have, especially in the range of if an employer has anywhere from 50 to 250 employees, that many times they can't get complete information about their plan from the insurance company. So they have no idea of how to manage their costs and their claims. Well, in a self-funded situation, all this information is going to be available to you. And that's one of the benefits and one of the positives in going self-insured. You'll have complete access to all information. But again, that means that the employer has to be more involved. They have to understand what they're getting into and how to manage the process. Also, employers can add numerous features to help manage frequency and claims. And these programs are typically called cost containment. So again, you can decide which of these cost containment programs are going to be included in your plan. So again, you don't take what the insurance company gives you here. You can actually design your program to utilize all these different programs. Disease management, utilization review and management, case management, bill audit and review services, audit network negotiation, patient advocacy, and what's really popular is the teledoc services. Many providers are offering this now as a way of cutting costs. Specialty care vendors and diagnosis and hemophilia wellness programs. So again, depending on which TPA and PPO networks you go with, can provide some or all of these various programs. So again, as an employer, you have to be, again, proactive in deciding which of these programs you want to be included, as opposed to going with the insurance company and deciding, well, it's either all or nothing. Here you can decide which programs are best suited to your situation. Let's stop right here and see if anybody has any questions.
Okay, I did not get any through the toolbar, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute. Just please be mindful that we can hear your hold music and your conversation. So if you're not asking a question, if you could hit your mute button, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
The conference has been unmuted.
Does anybody have any questions?
Larry, I just sent a question about Medicare Plus networks to get your opinion on those. Actually, they're non-networks, I guess.
And could you kind of explain what your question is?
Well, yeah, a lot of the TPAs are finding their niche in Medicare Plus reimbursements, where there's no network and they reimburse at a % above Medicare, a given negotiated percent negotiated with the plan.
And are these for
plan, the contract or the plan of benefits is that for primary care, let's say they'll pay 120% of Medicare. For hospitals, maybe 190% of Medicare, something along those lines. Stop-loss carriers are lowering their aggregate risk based on those. And
because they're controlling costs.
correct, and of course the employee is responsible possibly for the balance billing. So I was just wondering if you've had any experience with these and how you feel about this as an advantage.
You have to be real careful because the problem with those programs, you could be reducing your network.
Okay.
That's going to be the problem. And finding doctors are willing to take a reduced reimbursement. And again, depending on how much leverage you have with the providers and the provider networks, I mean, if you can negotiate that, that's fine, but you can't, that's going to be a problem. Now, what many employers are finding out here is that the way to reduce costs is actually to reduce your network. And that plays into, again, what an employer can do to reduce costs. So that could be another philosophy or another way of reducing costs.
And that was going to be my second question, how you felt about employer-based clinics, near-site or on-site clinics, in terms of offering primary care, particularly on a self-funded plan.
Well, I think see, the problem with going self-funded and offering these services, does the employer have the staff to really manage this? And that's the problem. The employer has to be more involved. And the beauty of having an insured product, the employer just sets it and forgets it. But again, if there's an issue or problem, there's no information. They don't know. And it comes at a cost. So in any of these situations, as you can see here, the employer has to have a staff and the involvement has to be great in order to cut costs. That's the problem. And having a clinic on site, there's some risk involved. So that's the downside of all this. The employer has to be more involved, and the HR department has to be robust. It has to understand what they're getting into and have the hands-on philosophy in making sure this is done right. Any other questions? Any other questions at all?
Okay, let me go ahead and mute.
The conference has been muted.
Insurance is extremely important. And you have, as an employer, have to understand and kind of get a handle on what type of risk you wanted to take, because the more stop-loss insurance you have, the less control you have over your benefits. So since employer is accepting the financial responsibility for medical claims, there's two concerns. Large claimants and overutilization. So how much risk as an employer do you want to take? And then stop-loss insurance provides protection against both scenarios. And the purpose behind stop-loss coverage is to cover catastrophic claims. So basically what you're doing is, when you go self-funded, is instead of your deductible with an insured product being $5,000, now it's $7,500 or $200,000. That's the risk you're willing to take. So there's two types of stop-loss coverage in this situation. There is a specific stop-loss coverage which covers individual catastrophic claims. How much risk is the employer wanted to take? So this is on individual claims. The second piece of this is aggregate stop-loss coverage, covering against overutilization on collective claims, totally. What type of risk are you willing to take as an employer? And the availability of competitive stop-loss coverage is one of the most critical decisions that an employer has to make in order to find out how much liability the employer is willing to take and ability to self-fund. So in regard to individual or specific stop loss, the employer is responsible for all claims on every member until the deductible is met under the stop loss, so it could be $75, $100, $200,000. Carriers can provide various deductible options to suit the employer's risk. The higher the deductible, the lower the price of the insurance. And occasionally specific individuals will be subject to higher deductible limits. And then again, aggregate stop loss. Claim maximum is normally set at 25% higher than the actual claims. It's a corridor, and that provides a cushion for the stop loss carrier. Aggregate can be difficult to secure due to lack of claims data, and especially I think this is a big problem because you're dancing in the dark the first couple of years that you go self-funded, because again the insurance company may not give you the information you need to set the loss, so the stop loss carrier has to kind of make up it as it goes along and kind of decide exactly how much risk they're willing to take. Aggregate stop loss is cheap. Historically, a group has a 2% chance of hitting the maximum. So again, the more information you can give the stop loss carrier on your situation, the better it is. So specific stop loss individual. Specific stop loss coverage provides protection for catastrophic. In this example right here, an employer with 250 employees selects a $75,000 specific deductible. Employee John Smith has a heart attack and the total claims incurred a total $195,000. The employer is responsible for the claims incurred by John Smith, and the stop loss carrier will then, because they've chosen a specific deductible of $75,000, the stop loss carrier picks up the rest. On the aggregate situation, aggregate stop loss provides a second layer of protection for self-funded plans. Stop loss carrier evaluates on 250 employee data and develops a claims attachment of $2 million. Then they adjust it by 25%. So again, it's $2.5 million. And I think this is important, especially now under healthcare reform, because there's no limitation on the liability. So again, aggregate, as I said before, coverage can be difficult to secure for lack of claims data. And aggregate coverage is not always purchased since medical claim information is rarely available for expected claims. Now here, since all claims are received and paid within the plan year, stop loss has various different options. And the two important terms you'll see is incurred, the first number. Incurred date refers to the date that the member receives the care, and this number designates the number of months qualified claims can be incurred. And then paid, that's the second number. Paid date refers to the date in which the claim is actually paid by the administrator. Generally, the turnaround time in this situation is between 6 to 10 weeks. Now, the contract, you can either have a 12-12 stop loss contract. Basically, in this, claims must be incurred and paid within the same 12-month period. A 12-12 contract has no run-out and no run-in or run-out protection. Sometimes sold as a terminal liability option. Another contract is 12/15. Claims must be incurred within 12 months and paid within 3 months following the end of the coverage period. This type of coverage is called run-out. It's available in contracts on a 12/18 to 12/24 basis. Employee insured plans are incurred basis and typically are 12/24 or greater. And again, in situations where claims are incurred but not, again, submitted and not paid within the same plan year. Another one, claims must be incurred within 15 months and paid within a 12-month period. This is called a run-out. So these are various options for stop-loss contracts. And the greater period of time that you have to pay claims, the more expensive it's going to be. Now, a prospective client currently offers 3 plans: HMO, PPO, low deductible, high deductible. All plans are currently fully insured through a major insurance company. The CFO of the organization believes that the insurance company is making too much money. The broker, consultant, and client work to secure claims data, enrollment information, so that the stop-loss carriers will have enough information to make an appropriate evaluation of the risk. After working with a number of stop-loss markets, received their stop-loss quotes, and now have the ability to determine the total cost of potential claims liability, stop-loss premium, and plan administration. So again, real-life scenario, there could be a, fully insured plan. Fully insured, they take all the risk. Here, the risk character are $450,000. Expected claim of 1.8 million. Stop loss, auxiliary vendors, access fees, and these are all the costs involved in designing a program. Now, in looking at these plans, here are some of the issues and problems you're confronting if you are deciding to go self-funded. Securing competitive stop loss, depending on the group size, location, available claims data, and I think available claims data is extremely important. Potential claim liability. You have to be comfortable with in determining how much risk your employer is willing to take. Not building claims reserves. Are you going to be, again, are you going to be funding any of the liability? Are you going to be setting aside any reserves for that situation? And if you are building up claims reserves, are you going to be looting it for other expenses? Suppose you have a business shortfalls and you want to raid the plan. That's something you don't want to do. Now, because of the fact that the employer designing the program, and there's nobody there to stop the employer to create exceptions, does the employer, again, somebody comes to you and says, well, my claim wasn't paid by the plan, why don't you create an exception? And the problem is, if you create an exception, those exceptions are not, again, covered by the stop loss, so the employer is on the hook. And one of the advantages of being insured is the fact that the insurance company stops you. Because many times, and when I'm involved with self-funding plans, the employer wants to create exceptions for employees that they like. And that's one of the disadvantages of being self-funded. Now, there's nobody to stop the employer. And the more exceptions you create, the more liability you create. Also remember HIPAA compliance. Because of the fact that now you have full access to all claims information, you have to make sure you're HIPAA compliant, privacy compliance. So you have to adopt HIPAA policies and procedures. You have to make sure you train your people. So that's another additional cost, where before the insurance companies handled everything. You didn't want to look at the information. Again, that comes at a disadvantage because you don't know what's going on. But lastly, as I mentioned before, and one of the disadvantages of self-funding is the non-discrimination testing. So this testing is under 105H, and you have to make sure whenever benefits you offer pass those rules. There's a eligibility test and a benefits test. Now, it doesn't mean you can't offer various levels of benefits, but anytime you create a separate level of benefit, you have to, again, make enough lower paid individuals eligible for that benefit to pass non-discrimination testing. Now, some of the advantages. Well, again, as I indicated, the employer has more control over plan design. There's no insurance mandates, state insurance mandates that you have to comply with. So you can design a program that meets the needs of your employees. And you could install ancillary services that meet your employees' needs, not what the insurance company is willing to give you. Also, you're going to have more access to, again, health plan data. You're going to know what's going on, but again, because of that, you're going to have concerns about HIPAA privacy. There's going to be lower administrative costs because of the fact you're not funding the insurance company's profits. And you could have more cash flow because of the fact that, depending on what your experience is, it could, again, be lower costs in offering benefits. And you have the ability to create a reserve. And again, that will drive your deductibles in that situation if you want to do that. Again, there's the elimination of carrier profit margin. And again, there's reduced premium tax. There's no insurance tax on this. And again, the avoidance of health insurance industry tax. So again, there's reduced taxes in this situation. No profit, but again, more involvement from the employer. Stacey, one, do you have any questions?
I do. I have one. Can't you build reserves in year one of self-funding since the fully insured plan being termed will cover runout?
For a limited period of time, that's the problem. And see, the problem in this situation is the first year you may not know what your liability is, depending on how much information the insurance company gives you. So you're kind of flying blind in this situation in designing the program. That's the problem. The first couple of years are pretty scary.
Okay.
And it will depend on how much information the insurance company is willing to give you.
Okay, that's the only question I have. Let me unmute.
The conference has been unmuted.
Does anybody have any questions? Anybody?
Okay, let me mute real quick.
Okay.
The conference has been muted.
So how does the Affordable Care Act affect self-funding? And again, requires employers with 50 or more and to be subject to the employer mandate. So again, because of this employer mandate, employers are looking for ways of offering benefits. And they're looking for ways of adjusting benefits to control costs. And as you can see over the last 4 or 5 years, employers are looking at this area because fully insured premiums are expected to jump. I mean, some of the premium increases have been outrageous. So that's why there's increased pressure on the employer to go self-funded. Other considerations are limited exposure to medical loss ratio rules. They don't apply to self-funding. Guaranteed issue, not applicable to stop-loss carriers. Stop-loss premiums are not subject to the ACA fees. Again, self-funded plans are not required to, again, offer essential health benefits. There's no health insurance tax that's subject to the insurance company. There's no premium tax on it. And again, as I indicated before, you're not required to offer state-mandated benefits. So again, that's why many employers are looking at self-funding as a way of reducing costs. So the McCord fee and transitional reinsurance fee will apply to fully insured plans and self-funded plans, but self-funded plans are exempt from both the risk adjustment health insurance industry due to the ERISA law. So again, this shows you, again, because insurance companies are subject to the tax, they pass the cost on to you. And this is, again, an indication of the health insurance tax that fully insured plans are subject to. And this is an estimate what the fees are going to be. So again, if you're self-insured, your plan won't be subject to this tax. And reduced premium and ACA taxes, again, annual premium, fully insured versus self-insured, how much, again, the premium tax, because of these additional taxes you're going to save by being self-insured. Are there any additional questions?
I do not have any at this time, but I did want to let everyone know that this webinar was recorded and it will be posted on our website probably by Thursday. So you can, our website, benefitexpressonline.com. I'm going to open it up for questions at this time.
The conference has been unmuted.
And again, I just want to emphasize the next seminar is June 28th. It's going to be a pretty extensive seminar, so please, it's going to probably take me between an hour to an hour and 20 minutes to go through all the developments. But it's extremely important that you attend this seminar because I'll go through everything. And this is just the development since December of 2015, so it picks up from the last seminar that we had in December of 2015. So it's only over the past 6 months. But again, I just want to emphasize I'm going to release and have the slides probably next week. But I'm looking at either 70 to 80 slides. So again, it's going to be pretty extensive. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Stacy. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.